Greetings, get a blurb here for you about the Ad Lib Gold 1000, the legendary sound card that I covered on LGR a little while back, and it's just going to be a follow-up to that. Just a couple of loose ends, things that I didn't mention, and there were some things that didn't get touched on, like what we're going to be talking about today, the MIDI output, or really the MIDI interface of the card itself, which uses your standard 15-pin game port connection around back that doubles as both joystick and MIDI. Very similar to what the Sound Blaster cards did and all the clones and whatnot, but I just didn't touch on it in the main retrospective that I did in LGR. So anyway, I've got the Woodgrain 486 still going here. The Ad Lib Gold is installed in there as it was in the main video. We're running Windows 3.1 right now. And then I've got a couple of different MIDI devices. So on the bottom there is the Roland Sound Canvas, the SC55ST, which I've also covered, sort of a cut-down computery version of the Sound Canvas SC55 Mark II. And then on top of that is an Arteria KeyStep, which is just a MIDI interface keyboard that I use in my main synth setup, which is that over there. A whole different thing. I've done a video on that as well. But anyway, we're going to be talking about a couple of different things here relating to this. Okay, so let's just test the MIDI out here for the moment anyway, which is connected to the Roland SC55 down there through a standard 15-pin game port to MIDI cable. So that's just plugging into that back there in the Ad Lib Gold. And then it's got a MIDI in and out cable with, the MIDI out going to the MIDI in of the Sound Canvas. Typical stuff. It works the same way on all kinds of sound cards back in the day. And the way it's set up is it's just got some drivers here. This is the MIDI synth for the Ad Lib Gold. This is the FM synth, the OPL3. And then there's this, Wave MIDI aux. And this allows you to select port, buffer size, interrupt, and DMA for the Ad Lib Gold. The MIDI portion of it, mainly. But see this part, 38C for the port. We'll get back to that later, but it's worth noting that this does not have MPU 401 support, so you can't select like port 330 or anything for any kind of UART intelligent mode, non-intelligent mode, any of that stuff. It just doesn't support that. But thanks to the drivers in Windows 3.1, you do have MIDI in and out for a couple of different things. So we've got some OPL3 synth options. Let's go ahead and hear what that sounds like. I'm going to open this here, the Passport MIDI jukebox. And as long as I have this set to the right thing, yeah, let's change it to GSS synth. This is the built-in synth on the Ad Lib Gold, the OPL3. So that's that. Pretty typical stuff. But if we were to switch it over to the MIDI out, now that's making use of the cable we got plugged into the Roland Sound Canvas, and we can use external MIDI devices to play MIDI instead of the built-in FM synth. And I don't know why, but it does weird things to it. It changes up the chorus, the reverb values. It does a whole bunch of weird things to the Sound Canvas. And it seems to change every time I load up this program and try different things. I don't know, man. That's not how it should sound at all. And I find that fascinating. And I didn't go into that in the main video, and I wanted to mention it. So that's one thing, but let's get out of here and let's try out the MIDI in. So this is tracks. I've also shown this on LGR, on the Yamaha CBX T3 video. So we're going to change the play port to the Yamaha synth, because it actually sounds decent and knows what to do with it. So the way that this works, let's just open this, and here we go. So this allows us to compose things. It's got a sequencer and all sorts of cool stuff, piano roll. And if you want, normally you can hook up some other MIDI device and have that send MIDI out to the MIDI in of your card, but it doesn't work here. Again, I don't know if it's just the lack of MPU 401 or what, but channel 1 here is set to that lead guitar, and if we change the MIDI through to channel 1, normally this lets me play with the keyboard, but I get absolutely nothing. I can't play out to the Ad Lib Gold. I can't play out to the sound canvas, but that makes sense. This one doesn't have a MIDI in on that sound canvas anyway. So anyway, whatever, it doesn't work. I don't know if it's the cable, I don't know if it's the drivers, the software, if it just doesn't have this capability, because on inspecting the 2 different manuals I have for the Ad Lib Gold, there's no real mention of much to do with MIDI. It's just this stuff. It tells you what the interface is, you know, what it has, MIDI in, out, and through, buffers and stuff. And it also says that it requires an optional MIDI cable adapter available from Ad Lib. Now, does that mean that it's different than the cable that I'm using? Because I'm using one that's meant for sound blasters, but maybe it's just different on the Gold. It just doesn't work. And as you can see, there's also some other mention of some other things. You got a MIDI driver, but that's for DOS. And the Windows stuff, that all goes through just what we saw earlier. You got these 2 things. That's it. These are all the settings that you get. So maybe there's an Ad Lib specific cable for the Ad Lib Gold. I don't know. Let's see, is there anything else on here? Yeah, MIDI interface of the Gold allows MIDI files to be recorded and played back using a MIDI adapter cable, any external MIDI instrument, and an Ad Lib Gold supporting sequencer program. So that's the other thing. Perhaps it's software. Perhaps Trax just doesn't know what to do with it. That's possible. And I've also tried some other stuff. So this is a program I also showed in the main LGR video, the test program, and this allows you to test some of these features. I didn't show the MIDI interface test really because I didn't have this stuff plugged in when I was making my review. So it was going to turn into this whole long tangent, but you know. And it is worth noting that I have looked at all the jumpers. All the jumpers are in the right spot. It is set to have joystick and MIDI. Let me just show you what's going on here. This is not going to show you what I thought it was. Never mind. So this is testing just the Ad Lib Gold's FM synth. Great. That works. And now that's the rolling sound canvas. That works. And now it doesn't work at all. Going from MIDI to Gold, and yeah, I am, you can't see it, but I am pressing keys and whatnot on the Arteria key step. It's playing a sequence, nothing is happening. Playing an arpeggiation, nothing's happening. Switched the inputs just around back. Doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. Let's get out of here. And another thing I want to check really quick is this, so we can see the configuration. Because look at this. Sound and MIDI port address starts at 388. That's just your regular FM synth. And that's the same as an Ad Lib. You know, this lets it be backwards compatible with OPL2 Ad Lib and whatnot. But you don't get any other options for setting like a port again, for instance, like with the MPU 401. There is no similar type of thing with that at all. There's also nothing in AutoExec.bat that talks about MIDI or whatever. These are the 2 lines you get. Now it sets the Gold again at 388, but that's just your FM synth Ad Lib stuff. It's not changing around where MIDI in goes. So this is my assumption, and that is that the Ad Lib Gold 1000 just is garbage at MIDI, unless you're using a specific cable, maybe, a specific program, specific drivers, specific software. Like most other things with the Ad Lib Gold, it's kind of a disappointment and a bit of a mess and bloated as balls. I mean, look how much free memory we're down to 357K of free memory in the drivers. All we've loaded is what you've seen. Anyway, check this out. That MIDI driver that's mentioned in the manual, now that's in memory too. What does it do? Not a whole lot as far as I can tell, unless you've got a program that specifically is looking out for it. That would be great if it did some other things beyond the programs that it came with. I showed all those in the main LGR video, but like, yeah, the write-up in the manual on it is preciously low on information. The file contains the MIDI driver. This low-level driver implements MIDI in and out serial port control. Okay. Oh yeah, and I also wanted to mention in the second edition of the manual, it also mentions that the MIDI device requires the AdLib MIDI pack. So that's referring to it, again, in a slightly different way than even the first edition of the manual did, which just makes me wonder, was there a specific proprietary or slightly different MIDI cable that AdLib made for the Gold that is a little bit different than the Sound Blaster, the Pro Audio Spectrum 16, or any of the others that are usually compatible with that kind of 15-pin interface? I don't know. Maybe it had serial coming out of the dongle as well as GamePort and MIDI. It's just a mystery at this point. Haven't been able to find anything on it in writing. But anyway, back to theorizing. It does make me think that maybe you might be able to do something else with the MIDI in and out if you had a program like Soft MPU that was modified in order to specifically take advantage of the Gold and then provide an MPU 401-like capability through software. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just completely theorizing here. But yeah, obviously as it stands, Soft MPU isn't going to do anything because it's not designed for that. It's designed for like Sound Blaster clones and whatnot. And of course, devices through the serial interface or the Sound Blaster's 15-pin MPU 401 connection. And this makes it intelligent mode and it works with games and whatnot. It's an awesome program, but it's got to be, you know, designed for the card. And I'm just not aware of anything that does something like this for the AdLib Gold. And there's so few of them, like, what, there's probably a couple dozen people that have an AdLib Gold that's working that they're actually using every so often. It's just not enough of a market to spend much time on getting this kind of solution to work, other than it'd be a challenge and it'd be interesting. Truthfully though, I'm just not knowledgeable enough on these type of things to really know. Like I said, I don't even know if it's the cable that's causing my problems with my MIDI in with the AdLib Gold and my Arteria or any other MIDI device where I'm trying to control the Gold through an external MIDI. I don't know if it's the cable or software or something else. What I do know though is that it's somewhat disappointing if you were to have, say, Duke 3D or whatever other game where you wanted to play some MIDI output, or you wanted to play the music, right? And you didn't want to just rely on the typical AdLib. I've got this nice rolling sound canvas. I'm going to plug it into my AdLib Gold to get some cool sounds that aren't AdLib. So I would switch over to General MIDI or Sound Canvas. But of course that requires a MIDI port. You gotta have MPU 401 support of some kind, whether it's Soft MPU or an actual MIF IPC card or the clones or whatever. There's other options, but in terms of what the AdLib Gold can do on its own, you got nothing for this kind of thing. So anyway, all the other MIDI stuff that is outside of your standard AdLib Gold support is pretty much not there. And it just kind of adds to the list of things that are disappointing about this wonderful card. I don't take pleasure in crapping on this legend of a sound card. It's really, really cool. I'm grateful to have been able to cover it. I like it a lot. It sounds amazing when you got programs that take advantage of it. But, if you were wanting to mess around with MIDI in and out, you're a little more limited than I even thought you were. So that's all. I just wanted to talk about this, and please let me know if I've got some things wrong, or maybe software or hardware stuff that I can mess around with that would make it different. This card has so little information about it out there on the internet compared to so many other cards that there's just not a ton to go on when it comes to some of these things. But yeah, if you got some information or theories or whatever, post them in the comments. I'd love to read them. Learning about this stuff is absolutely fascinating, and there's a ton that I just don't know about it very clearly through this long ramble of a video. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next blurb.